full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good morning, EduFolk. I hope you are all well. Welcome to Sunday's weekly review. We are here once again. We have got Paul, Catherine, and Shaniqua with us. We've got a fabulous, esteemed panel, and I am very excited to get cracking with this week's stories. They're all kind of interlinked in sort of some way or another. So let's get started. Now, I first want to begin with a story about the rise in home education since the pandemic. So the number of children moving to home education in the UK is at its highest since the pandemic, with councils receiving almost 50,000 notifications in the last academic year. This is in part due to mental health concerns. The primary reason given has been to do with children, and 64% of families expressing worries and concerns about children's mental health in school, being picked on, being bullied, etc. There are regional variations in this. It's most notable, or the increase has been most notable in the North East, North West, West Midlands, Scotland and Wales, but Northern Ireland has seen a decline. Some parents believe that home education has reduced stress for their children and that they have thrived in this particular situation. Paul, I want to come to you first on this one. What are your thoughts here? I mean, do you think that this is a justified situation? Do you think that I mean, it's difficult really, because coming from teaching backgrounds as we all do, we want to see children in school, maybe not necessarily being educated at home unless they absolutely have to be.
I think that's absolutely right. For me, homeschooling, it is an entitlement. Parents are allowed to homeschool their children, but it's a very, very, very much a last resort for me. There's no doubt that children and young people are struggling nowadays. The pandemic just worsened that. It really accelerated a lot of what was already there and already kind of bubbling under the surface. I always think it's very difficult for schools to be flexible and agile nowadays, and really to meet the rapidly changing needs of young people. Now, schools would love to be able to reach out to every individual, every child, and be able to welcome them into a safe, comfortable environment where they can thrive and grow and develop. But schools have other priorities that they have to look to as well. They're very much shackled in terms of curricula. They are focused on outcomes and results and so on. And it's difficult to change your ways and to have that flexibility, and even to be able to give over time to help to get young people into schools. I mean, I remember quite often having to go out to the car park at 8:45 in the morning, talk to a parent and grandparents, and maybe coax a child out of the car and get them up and into the foyer maybe, and that was a great success. And sometimes you got them into the classroom, and sometimes, it didn't work. You got them no further, and then they would regress, and it took another fortnight to get to the same place. But on another matter, I do have concerns about homeschooling. And look, there's a variety. I mean, some homeschooling, I have no doubt it's well done. But we've no way of knowing, the quality and the nature of what goes on. And it's one thing to know a bit of physics and to be able to teach a formula or something, but that whole education, that whole social engagement, that whole structure to the day, and that whole rigor that goes on. And in my day, we used to talk a lot about the hidden curriculum, and children learn so much from that hidden curriculum. How do you play? How do you get on with others? And I know bullying can be an issue, But walking away from it and going home and not being able to manage and deal and learn and being taught how to deal with people who are causing you distress, that's a problem, I think. And then if they have opted out of school and they're at home, well, where do you learn all of these things? I think that's a difficulty.
Most definitely.
Just the last major concern I have is around safeguarding issues. I mean, teachers spot things all day, every day. And if that child's at home all the time, it's just a set of eyes that aren't there.
Most definitely. Shaniqua, I want to pick up on what was about the social side of it, because I'm sure you've noticed in your classes since the pandemic that, and I know I have, I mean, we all sort of work in, or have worked in, sort of different parts of schooling, you know, be it primary, secondary, be it further education, whatever it is. The social impact of the pandemic and these children's social skills is definitely something that I know we've talked about in the past. And if you're educating children at home, then they are missing out on that. I just wanted to know kind of your thoughts on that.
No, I agree. I do feel like children who are being homeschooled miss out on that. And I know there are some great home education homeschooling networks out there. So, you know, not to take away from that, there are some great networks and I know they meet regularly, but I feel like there's something about being in the classroom and that's preparing you for future life as well. When you go to secondary school, from a primary school basis, but you go to secondary school, then you go to university, college, all of these aspects where you'll be surrounded by children. And actually working in a Peru, a couple of years ago, or it was last year, you've got children in such small classes. And actually we realized, you know, that was great, but also they found it harder when they went back to mainstream because they were so used to even just that small classroom of like 6 or 7 children. So for you to just be by yourself all the time, that's quite difficult. And also it's quite difficult for the person who is homeschooling, because I agree with Paul in so many ways, everything you were saying, but especially I think, you know, we are teachers, we've been trained to teach, you know, we follow the curriculum, and that curriculum is not, we don't just teach it for the sake of it. For our children to do really well in our schooling system, they have to follow the curriculum. So I feel like some of our children, they'll be missing out. And I was kind of shocked when I read how many notifications there were in the last academic year from families wanting to take their children out of school, just because I think school is an important place to be. And it's sad to know so many children are missing out on that school experience. And that also says that a lot of parents seem to think there's something wrong with the schooling system. And, you know, it just gives us a lot to think about. So, and overall safeguarding, it's important that, you know, our children don't risk, you know, falling off the radar, poor education, their well-being, all of these things, so important, hard to safeguard. And, you know, as you say, social aspect.
Oh, most definitely. And Catherine, I want to pick up on something that Shaniqua said about parents and their relationship with schools. And I know we certainly, as a panel on Weekly Review, in shows, various Teacher Talk radio shows, this has been talked about. I certainly have noticed in the environment I'm in that breakdown in communication between parents and schools, and certainly exacerbated by the pandemic. I wonder, have you sort of noticed and experienced that? And do you think maybe that is in large part why we are seeing such a rise in parents taking their children out of school?
I think there's challenges, certainly, but I'm going to perhaps point the finger not so much at the schools themselves, who are overstretched and I think doing their best, and I'm going to point it towards the kind of and not the individuals in these services, but the early intervention, that the waiting lists are so huge and so long. And I work in a secondary school, and I certainly have seen individuals who I wonder how it would have turned out if they had had better early intervention. And, you know, I absolutely understand that parents meet the schools in a direct way, and that's the face of education, isn't it? When you want to complain to somebody, that's whose name you've got and whose door you can turn up to. But, you know, schools are waiting for, you know, children to reach the end of waiting lists and have early interventions. And, you know, if you see your child utterly distressed and distraught daily, I know of family members who are the ones who are trying to get that child out of the car and into the school and all of those kinds of things. Certainly it's not, it's happening in schools, but I think that if there was a much clearer pathway to a very early intervention, perhaps a lot of this could all have been avoided.
Oh, most definitely. A very interesting one to keep an eye on, and again, one I'm sure we will come back to. In a moment, we're going to move on to talk about counselling in schools. Now, speaking of well-being in schools, this is another one that caught my eye this week. And a study has suggested that for every £1 invested in primary and secondary school counselling, it could yield an £8 return through improved job prospects and attendance, with lifetime fiscal benefits to the government estimated at 1.9 billion against the cost of about 250 million. So the investment in school counselling ultimately, it is believed, would, financially at least, I don't know if this is the aspect we should be focusing on, we'll come to that in a moment, could be very beneficial. Impact on mental health employment. Universal access to counselling is projected to generate 1.7 billion from increased employment and higher wages, and 106 million from reduced rates of depression in adulthood. The additional benefits of having counselling across primary and secondary schools, it's believed it could reduce truancy, which could save 19 million, and reduced exclusions could save 15 million in the long term. Currently, approximately 5,300 counsellors would be needed to deliver 4.4 million sessions in England, with current data suggesting many counsellors could handle additional clients despite workforce challenges. A significant proportion of schools already offer on-site counselling. And there is political support from Labour and the Liberal Democrats for placing mental health professionals in schools. Those specifics regarding these counsellors are not yet clear, because, of course, we are now in election season, and this is a hot topic. Shaniqua, coming to you first. Does the school you're in at the moment have an on-site counsellor?
Yeah, well, we have someone who comes in every few days, which is great. And I think, the children really thrive. They enjoy those sessions. And I think even from young, it gives that ability to just talk about your emotions, talk about things. And I think I feel like this is great. The sooner children can get access to counselling, the greater the difference it makes. And I just think even in general with adults, I feel like as an adult, when I've done counselling, I sometimes do it when it's too late as well, when things are bad. And actually just getting these children to do it when, things are not that bad, but actually we're going through our emotions, talking about our emotions, stop before things get worse. But even if they are getting worse, having that counsellor. But my thing about this is it's a great initiative. It's great that's being introduced. But we introduce these things, but then can we keep them going? Does the government have enough money to keep it going? Because then you find so many schools have it and then it stops. And then it's just not, it's not working. What's the point then? We lose that out. And I think I read something a head teacher said the other day, and they said scrapping counselling for primary school pupils has had a drastic negative impact. And this head teacher spoke about how it was doing really well. And then, the funding stopped. They didn't have enough money. In my school, we want more children to do counselling. I have children on a waiting list, but unfortunately, we just have enough money for this one counsellor for the whole school, twice a week. So, great initiative, but how do we keep it going? It needs to keep on going. So.
I know, that's absolutely perfect. I mean, Catherine, this is very much kind of the article I read was very much talking about the fiscal benefits and the financial benefits. Is that how we should be viewing children's mental health? Of course, we are playing a long game here, and the investment is crucial, and it should start young, absolutely. But should we just be looking at this from a financial perspective?
I think it is a bit of a sad state of affairs, but at this point in time, if that's the argument that wins the day, then I will be happy to get behind it, because I think there's not just one reason for doing it, and the greater the portfolio, I suppose, of arguments for the benefits of it, the more likely somebody somewhere is going to support it. I don't think it's the primary reason, but I do think it is a true reason. And, you know, if we turn it around from the benefit to the economy, you know, if I think about some children that I know, something I tend to say when sort of making decisions around this is, if you don't pay for it now, you'll pay for it later. And it's not like there's suddenly an extra cost or more money. It's just you're paying the cost in a different time frame. So, you know, for example, if you wanted to, as I spoke earlier about the queues for various, you know, waiting lists for educational psychologists or whatever, you know, I had an educational psychologist review my son, and I felt that it was better to pay for it now and not wait until he had a nervous breakdown later. And I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. And I think it's the same kind of thing that's going on. Yes, I'm sure it would be wonderful to have all of these people who are much more functional and not in the not off work for mental health reasons, not in the criminal justice system, not in hospitals with, you know, very severe mental health difficulties. It's part of an argument, you know, at this point in time. If it carries the day, then crack on.
And Paul, coming to you, your thoughts on this whole process, and certainly again touching on the idea that this is very much from sort of fiscal and financial benefit. It sort of seems to be the angle at the moment, rather than actually the focus on children's well-being.
Yeah, and this is an area I do have, you know, a lot of thoughts on, and a vested interest. I mean, I've been a counsellor and a teacher, both for 39 years. I was on the executive of the BACP, and for quite a while I was chairman of CIE, Counselling and Education. It always worries me when money and targets go hand in hand with something like a human endeavour. And the fear I have is that, you know, we'll hit the target and miss the point. And that's the point of counselling, is not about, you know, money or political gain or what will happen in 4 years if we put counselling in there. You see, it's not a magic wand. Counselling isn't a magic wand. Now, having said those two things, counselling is extremely effective, and I am 100% behind doing it. But there are practicalities, there are logistical issues, and then when you put those political things of targets and money behind it, you know, I do have concern, I do have worries about it. The last thing I'll say is the University of Roehampton in 2016, they did a study, and they demonstrated clearly that counselling in schools is extremely effective, but it has very little influence on children's willingness to commit to or to attend schools. And interestingly, that article said the counselling is aimed at the missing middle. And so, I don't know. I mean, how do you find the missing middle? How do you get them into psychological contact with a counsellor? And then, you know, I don't know. I have my doubts about the scheme and so on, but I'm fully committed to the effectiveness of counselling, and especially counselling and early intervention in schools.
And I think we're all in agreement there that this is a very important thing, but it needs to be done properly, and the focus needs to be in the right manner. Now, before we move on to our third story of the day, which I know is going to be a very interesting one, I just want to remind you of some lovely sponsors we've got at Teachers Talk Radio at the moment. We've got a few, so do bear with me on this. We have John Catt back, which is great. So this show is in fact brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, who you should be aware by now are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out and level up your professional development today, and visit johncattbookshop.com. We have another discount code for you, but it is slightly different to the one before. So this one is JCTTR2425, and that gives you 20% off the entire catalogue. So if you're wanting to update your professional reading or get some books in for your summer reading, then now is the time. So that's that one. We've also got Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident lifelong readers? Again, join the online International Reading Conference, which is for free, by the way, 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen and friend of Teachers Talk Radio, and the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. If you would like more information on that, then you need to go to readingsolutions.co.uk, and you can see our banner at the bottom there. And finally, I feel like I'm whizzing through these, but all this information is all readily available all over Teachers Talk Radio, X or Twitter if you prefer. And we regularly talk about these sponsors. So if you miss any of this, please do not worry. But our final one, which we will also talk about in Shows of the Week, is Easy for You, empowering education where innovation meets accessibility. Their subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but by eliminating financial barriers and streamlining support and embracing technology, Easy for You isn't just providing tools, they are shaping a future where every student can thrive unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education one device at a time. And if you would like more information on them, you can go to easyforyou.school. I'm going to double check that link because that seems a little bit of a strange one, but that's the one that I have, but I will confirm whether that is the correct one or not. Finally, after I've just word vomited all of that out, we are going to talk about school trips.
Full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Okay, so our final story for today, and if we could just pop on, I'm just going to pop on this here, which is a tweet from Naomi Fisher, and I've only clipped a short part of it. It's actually a longer tweet, and you actually go and read the full thing. And it says, at this time of year, I hear about a lot of children excluded from trips and events because of their attendance and behaviour over the year. It's part of a worrying trend which a number of parents and young people tell me about, where anything enjoyable in some schools is turned into a reward which has to be earned by good behaviour. Now, this is kind of a two-parter here because we're talking about children being allowed to attend school trips based on their behaviour. And the attendance side of it is kind of another aspect to it, which in my mind, and we'll come on to how you will feel about this in a moment, the attendance side of it should not factor in my mind. But the behavior side, I do feel strongly about, and I'm intrigued to know how this week's panel feels about this. So, Catherine, I'm going to come to you first. And I suppose the question here is, should children's attendance on end-of-year school trips or residentials be conditional on their behaviour throughout the year? And I feel like this is not a yes/no question. This is, however you wish to proceed. I'm going to stop talking and let you share your thoughts.
So I worry about the attendance part because let's say you like break your leg at Christmas, and have to spend like a month in a plaster cast or whatever. I don't know what happens when you break your leg, but let's suppose there's something that happens to you that requires you to be absent. I think to then lose your trip, and I don't know if that's actually going on. We're looking at a tweet. I don't know what cases there are where that has happened. But I agree with you that seems different to the behaviour issue. I believe that all behaviour should be able to, if you've had a misdemeanour, you should be able to earn it back. There should be kind of a reintegration or kind of reparation strategy, I suppose. If you make a bad choice, maybe at Christmas time, you should be able to work it off. I don't know, that's not quite right. I don't mean sort of, that sounds quite chain gangy, but you should be able to earn it back. I think the big concern is if a child or young person is a danger to themselves and others. And by that I mean somebody, you know, who cannot be safe on an activity because perhaps they have very unpredictable behavior, and that needs particular careful management. And I think every effort should be made to enable participation, but it comes down to a safety question for me. I think that would be where I would put the line, but I think it's a very fuzzy grey line.
Interesting. Paul, coming to you next. I'm very intrigued to hear your feelings on this.
Well, I think the answer is yes and no. More or less like everything in teaching, it's not clear. And I think Catherine makes a good point. Yes, there are absences from school which are unavoidable. You know, and her example of a broken leg is good. But I think where absence is cynical and contemptuous, spurious, and very much, you know, part of an insult to the school. And we all know schools have children like that. I think for a child to turn up, you know, at the end of, you know, a year where they haven't attended, to turn up and try and go on a school trip for a day because it's good fun, it's great crack, I don't think that's acceptable at all. So it's each case on its merit, with good communication with the parent, with the child, the school, you know, expressing its point of view. Absolutely agree. Every child should have their chance to redeem themselves and so on. And in a way, it's the same, I think, for behavior. You know, misdemeanors can happen. And, you know, look, I used to always say when a child gets into trouble and so on, my job is to help them get out of it and learn better adapted behaviors and so on. But where that misbehavior is cynical, it's contemptuous, where it's an insult to teachers, where it's a threat, where it's dangerous, and so on. And I think, you know, even sometimes, and they're rare, of course, those kind of things are rare, you know, it's a straight no. You know, we had an example one time where, you know, a child was a poor attender, and when they were in school, they were very badly behaved and threats to teachers and so on. On social media, they know exactly when the trip's happening, where we're going. And the child turned up to where we were one day, driven there by the parents. The child came across to the bus and was a lot of trouble. And of course, the parents videoed it all from the safety of their car, and they put it out live on social media and so on. And I just think there are all kinds of troubles, difficulties, and so on. And, you know, we pretty much predicted that. And I think those are the things that schools want to avoid. But on the other hand, you give every child every chance. We are about education. We are about learning. We are about improving the lot of everybody.
I suppose it's very difficult often to establish where those boundaries are and where that line is. Shaniqua, coming to you on this one.
Oh, okay. Just in general. Okay. So I definitely think we should be trying to create opportunities for all children. We want all children to go on trips. You know, going on a trip is educating outside of the classroom. It's getting the opportunity to learn in a different environment. It's so great. But I believe, same thing as Paul and Catherine, it's a yes and no. There, you know, it's not as blanket straight as some people want to believe. I wish it was, but it's not. You know, I think it comes down to, and I'm just going to say as a trip in general, not just end of year, but just trips in general. I feel like it's all about safety. It's all about safeguarding. You know, safeguarding is paramount. If I feel like the safety of the other children, the safety of the child, of a child and themselves, it's not gonna be great, then we're gonna have to work on things. And if it's not gonna work out going on the trip, you can't go on the trip, and we're gonna have to find something else. You know, obviously, I think if it's behavior and it was a situation a long time ago and you've had your consequence, I believe you've had your consequence. But then if it's nearer the time, I do believe that is it. And if your safety, as I said, if you're not going to be safe, if you're going to endanger others, we can't take you out on a public trip with everyone else. I can't be assured, even if I've done my risk assessment, I can't be assured that actually you're going to be safe. So why would I do that? So I just think You know, there are things we could do. We can bring along parents, guardians, bring along SLT. But at the end of the day, if we don't think that child is going to be safe, then I can't let you go. But of course, we want the children to go. We want to create these opportunities. And actually, some children, especially who find it hard in the classroom, thrive on a school trip. You know, they love that element of being outside. And, you know how they are sometimes in the classroom, but outside, they're absolutely enjoying it. So you want to give them that opportunity. But I also think, and that counts for any child, it's fair consequences in my classroom. If you've not done what you need to do, and it is nearer to the school trip time, that is it. But there might have already been, if I've given you that consequence already, then that's it. I'm not holding on to that. So yeah, that's me. That is me. But the intention is to go on a trip. But if it's going to be a safeguarding fail, then no.
Very, very interesting. And I'm sure that we will hear more on this as the academic year draws to a close. Right now, it is time for Shows of the Week. Okay, always an interesting time with the show. I always would like to know what people have been listening to. So, Catherine, coming to you first.
So I was sat at home the other day trying to do some evening work and be very efficient and prepared for my next day. But I clicked on LinkedIn and I found Tom Rogers talking to Guy Claxton, and I could not turn it off. It was so fascinating, and so much about what was being said in that interview was just, it really resonated with me. In particular, some of the differences between the interventions that have a similar short-term goal in terms of results, but a very drastically different long-term goal in that some sustain success and well-being over time and some seem not to. And this idea that somehow we've had a tradition in education, and tradition's an interesting word because it was a sort of progressive versus traditional dichotomy, which I'm not utterly convinced by anyway, but this idea that we've had a tradition of false proxies and looking for the measurement of quick progress, which actually doesn't necessarily translate into, fulfilled and, fruitful adult sort of learning behaviors and employment, whatever you might want to measure it against. And so that whole conversation, I think we need to have a good hard look at what works and what we're looking for and over what period of time we're looking for it. So I highly recommend that discussion.
Fantastic. Okay, Shaniqua, coming to you next.
I decided to take a listen to Adam Colbeck's show this week, and it was Education in the Election. What should the government focus on? And in that episode, there was Adam and he had Carla Whelan, and they were talking about what educational focus for the incoming government should be and their vision for the sector in the future. And I felt like it was such an important conversation to take place, especially with this upcoming election. And it just gave me some things to think about. And yeah, I highly recommend, because we're going to see stuff everywhere at the moment with education, election. And I just felt like it was a really good listen and had me really thinking about what should I do? So yeah.
Fabulous. Paul, coming to you.
Lots of great shows this week, as ever. And I chose John Gibbs' show, The Effective Learning and the Science of Recall. Now, I got a bit worried at the title, but quickly I was reassured. And Professor, I think Shanna Carpenter was her name. What it was really doing was talking about how children can learn much more effectively, rather than just looking at, the banking method. Paulo Freire talked about the banking method. We just accumulate and build up. This is much more like Socratic learning. It's about active, participative learning and so on. And although she has, quite a scientific approach to it, as the title would tell you, there's some great lines in that program. And John himself talked about the mess of learning. And I thought, I can identify with that. So great show, essential listening for all teachers who want to improve their classroom practice.
Fantastic. And finally, from me, it was our sponsored show this week. hosted by James Radburn and Tom Rogers in the background as well. And this was tackling digital poverty, promoting digital literacy and making education accessible. And this was in line with Easy4U. And the whole discussion centered around what Easy4U's premise or point is, which is equipping students, pupils with one-to-one devices, putting the onus on them to look after these devices, make sure that they are charged and ready to go, and the benefits of that in schools, including making sure that children have that digital access, making sure that they are not missing out on a world that is moving incredibly quickly. As we know, education is changing. Curriculum needs to change to come in line with this, and that's a whole separate conversation. But it was really interesting to listen to all those who came and joined in with the show, who I can't remember the names of. I think they are, in fact, they are here in front of me. We've got Simon Tarry was there, Segam Mulji, and Laura Knight, who is a digital innovation lead, and she was absolutely fascinating as well with her thoughts on feelings on how we can become more digitally literate in school, how one-to-one devices are such an intrinsic part of that, and it is well worth listening back to and maybe getting in touch with Easy4U for yourselves and seeing what they can provide your school with, because it's all tailored individually. It's all worked out with the schools themselves, and it's very much a personal and I think a very kind of futuristic way of making sure that schools can be part of the technological future. So we have covered a lot in a short space of time, as we always manage to. Thank you for listening. You can follow us on Twitter or X, whichever you prefer to call it, at TT Radio Official, and LinkedIn at Teachers Talk Radio. And as you know, this broadcast goes out across multiple platforms as well, where you are able to catch up with us. So thank you to my fantastic panel. Thank you to Paul, Catherine, and Shaniqua for joining me this morning. I will see you all again very soon. Have a lovely rest of the weekend. And chat soon.
Full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused